Hey there, history buffs. Before you nod off into a snooze fest, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this wild ride. Ever wondered how people survived in the medieval era without Google? Spoiler alert, it wasn't pretty. Today, we're diving into the bizarre, the grotesque, and the downright shocking practices of our ancestors. Picture this: in the year 1305, a Scottish hero named William Wallace was executed in the most gruesome way possible, hanged, drawn, and quartered. Sounds like a fun Saturday night, right? Or how about the ancient Romans, who believed that drinking gladiator blood could cure epilepsy? Talk about a quirky remedy. But wait, there's more. Did you know that in medieval England, you could be punished for simply looking at someone the wrong way? Yes, you heard that right. They had a thing called the stocks, a delightful form of public humiliation. And if you thought the Spanish Inquisition was just a catchy phrase, think again. They had their own twisted sense of justice, complete with torture devices that would make even the bravest knight cringe. Now, let's talk about love, medieval style. Ever heard of courtly love? It was more about obsession than romance, often leading to disastrous consequences. Imagine pining for someone you can never have, all while feigning chivalry. How romantic, or is it just tragic? So, are you ready for some bizarre facts and specific dates that will keep you on the edge of your seat? Get ready for an episode that will make you question humanity and maybe even your own life choices. And hey, if you need to catch some Z's, turn on loop so this episode can repeat until you drift off into a historical dreamland. Let's get started. The Viking Age. A time when men sported magnificent beards, women rocked braided hairstyles, and oars were, well, just oars, right? Wrong. The saga of Viking Longship Oar length standardization procedures is a tale filled with whimsy, absurdity, and the occasional brawl over whether a 6-foot oar was superior to a 7-foot one. Buckle up, dear reader, for we are about to embark on a journey through time, from the earliest records of oar lengths to the shocking practices of Viking shipbuilders. Let's set sail in the early 8th century, shall we? Picture the frosty fjords of Norway, circa 750 AD. The Vikings were starting to realize that their longships, those marvelous vessels that could cut through the waves like a hot knife through butter, needed a little something to help them glide through the waters, namely, oars. But here lies the first conundrum: how long should an oar be? The earliest records indicate that oars varied wildly in length. Archaeological finds suggest that oars could be anywhere from 5 to 10 feet long. Can you imagine the chaos? Hey Bjorn, pass me that 6-foot oar, only to have your friend hand you a 9-footer. It's no wonder Viking battles often turned into slapstick comedy routines. By 800 AD, as Viking raids became more organized and systematic, the need for standardization became glaringly obvious. The Vikings were not just raiders, they were also shrewd businessmen. They needed to transport goods efficiently, and let's face it, having oars that didn't match was a bit like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle with pieces from different boxes. Enter the legendary shipwright Asmund the Accurate. This chap hailed from what is now Oslo, Norway, and in 802 AD, he proposed the first known, or length standardization act. His groundbreaking document, although lost to history, probably because it was written on a piece of parchment that served as a napkin during a feast, famously stated, "An oar shall be no less than 6 feet and no more than 8 feet, lest we confuse our longships with the fishing boats of the fjords." Ah, Asmund! The man was a visionary. But how did he reach this conclusion? Legend has it that during a particularly brutal winter, Asmund attempted to row a longship using a 5-foot oar. The result? He and his crew ended up in the neighboring village of Oslo, a mere 300 miles away, after being blown off course for 3 weeks. Can you imagine the surprise on the faces of the villagers? Oh, look! The Vikings have come to raid us with a slightly too short oar. The following decade saw the rise of oar guilds. Yes, you read that right, oar guilds. In 825 AD, the Guild of the Sturdy Oar was founded in Trondheim. Membership was exclusive, and the initiation ritual involved paddling a longship across a treacherous fjord using an oar that was 2 feet longer than the standard. Talk about a test of endurance. Members would often exchange tales of their near-death experiences, which only added to the guild's mystique. By 850 AD, Viking explorers were reaching new lands, and the oar situation was becoming increasingly dire. There were reports of ships getting stuck in rivers because the oars were too long to maneuver. Imagine a band of Vikings trying to escape a pursuing enemy while yelling, "Quick! Shorten the oars!" To which one brave soul would reply, "Too late. We're stuck." Now, that's a dramatic exit. In 872 AD, during the infamous or Conference of Hrafnsvik, a name that literally means Raven Bay, representatives from various Viking clans gathered to debate the pressing question, should oars be standardized by length or weight? The discussions were heated, with some arguing passionately for shorter, lighter oars that were easier to handle, while others insisted on longer, sturdier ones for better speed. At one point, a particularly boisterous warrior named Ragnar the Rowdy stood up and proclaimed, "If my oar can't double as a weapon, what's the point of it being long?" This led to a spontaneous duel between Ragnar and a rival named Eirik the Efficient, which ended with both men tumbling into the icy water. They emerged, shivering but laughing, and by the end of the night, they had settled on the 6.5-foot compromise that would become the standard for centuries to come. Fast forward to 900 AD, and the standard oar was officially recognized across the Viking world. It was a glorious day, indeed. The Norsemen now had an oar that measured exactly 6.5 feet in length, which they proudly displayed on their ships like a badge of honor. It was during this time that Viking shipbuilders began engraving their oars with intricate designs, often depicting stories of their ancestors. But what of the curious practices? Oh, dear reader, hold on to your helmets. It was during this period that a bizarre ritual known as the oracle emerged. Once a year, during the Festival of the Oars, villagers would gather around the largest oar in the region and ask it questions. It was believed that the spirits of past shipwrights resided within the wood, and they would answer in the form of creaks and groans. One year, a particularly ambitious villager asked, "O mighty oar, will I be a great warrior?" The oar creaked ominously, and the crowd gasped. Then came a loud crack, which sent splinters flying and the villager tumbling backward into a barrel of fish. The villagers took this as a sign that perhaps he should stick to fishing instead. In the meantime, the Viking longships were evolving. By 950 AD, shipbuilders were experimenting with different materials and designs. The introduction of iron fittings allowed for sturdier oars, but this also sparked a new debate: should oars be standardized by weight instead of length? In 965 AD, a fierce debate erupted at the oar summit of Skara, where one faction proposed lightweight oars for the agile Viking, while the other argued for heavy-duty oars for the brawn. At this summit, a crafty merchant named Sigrid the Shrewd proposed a brilliant idea: why not sell oars of various weights and lengths to meet the needs of different clans? This led to an oar bazaar where Vikings could haggle over their oar of choice, much like they did with livestock and precious metals. The merchants thrived, and soon enough, oars became a currency of sorts, traded for food and ale. By the late 11th century, the Viking Age was winding down, and the longship or standardization procedures had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The average oar length was now firmly established at 6.5 feet, give or take a few inches for artistic flair. But even the most standardized of oars could not escape the clutches of time. In 1070 AD, the great historian Snorri Sturluson recorded the final chapter of oar history in his epic work, the Saga of Oars. He wrote, "And thus it was that the great oars of old, having served their purpose, were transformed into the fine furniture of the new realm. Let no man forget the glory of the oar." So here we are, dear reader, with the saga of Viking longship or length standardization behind us. Who knew that the length of an oar could stir such chaos and camaraderie among the fierce Norsemen? From Asmund the Accurate to Sigrid the Shrewd, the tale of oar length stands as a testament to the creativity and absurdity of a people who lived life to the fullest. Next time you find yourself on a boat, whether it be a Viking longship or a humble canoe, take a moment to appreciate the humble oar. It might just be the most underrated instrument of history, bridging the gap between chaos and adventure, one stroke at a time. Who knows? Maybe you'll find yourself whispering sweet nothings to your oar, just like the Vikings did, and perhaps, just maybe, it will reply with a creak of approval. #### The mundane history of Viking longship or length standardization procedures. #### Introduction, a sea of standardization. In the grand tapestry of Viking exploration and trade, one might expect tales of daring raids, epic sea voyages, and heroic sagas. Yet, beneath the waves of legend lies a surprisingly mundane yet vital aspect of their maritime prowess: the standardization of longship or lengths. From the 9th to the 11th centuries, the Norsemen navigated not only the seas but also the intricate bureaucracy of oar length regulations. In this exploration, we unveil the construction methods, bureaucratic rules, roles, and technical specifications that underscored this surprisingly complex endeavor. Construction methods. Crafting the perfect oar. The Vikings, renowned craftsmen of their age, employed a variety of construction methods to create oars that would withstand the rigors of the open sea. The primary materials used were oak and ash, both of which were plentiful in Scandinavia. Oak, with its durability, was favored for the shaft, while ash, being lighter yet resilient, was often used for the blade. 1. Material selection. Oak, strong, heavy, and resistant to wear, ideal for the shaft. Ash, flexible and lightweight, perfect for the blade. 2. Construction techniques. Carving. Oars were hand-carved from single pieces of wood, ensuring strength and integrity. This process could take several days, depending on the craftsman's skill and the wood's quality. Laminating. In some instances, particularly when crafting larger oars, laminated techniques were used, where layers of wood were glued together for added strength. Some say this was a desperate attempt to thwart the wooden splinter monster that haunted Viking shipyards. 3. Costs. A single oar could cost anywhere from 1 to 3 silver coins, depending on the craftsmanship and materials. Given that a longship could carry 30 oars or more, the total cost for outfitting a ship could soar into the realm of 90 silver coins, enough to make even the most hardened Viking reconsider their spending habits. Bureaucratic rules and punishments, keeping the oars in line. The standardization of oar lengths didn't happen without a fair share of bureaucracy. By 950 AD, the Viking Age was witnessing the rise of chieftains who understood the importance of unified naval power. To this end, they instituted a set of rules and regulations governing oar lengths, aiming to standardize them to avoid the chaos of mismatched rowing. 1. Standard length. The official regulation dictated that the ideal oar length be between 3.5 to 4.5 meters, with specific adjustments based on the ship's size. This was not a mere suggestion, it was a guideline enforced with the vigor of a Norse god. 2. Punishments for non-compliance. Craftsmen found producing oars that deviated from the standard could face severe penalties. These included fines of up to 5 silver coins for minor deviations, banishment from the shipbuilding guild for repeat offenders. In extreme cases, a craftsman could find themselves subject to the dreaded wooden bench of shame, where they would be forced to sit and listen to tales of perfect oar lengths while being mocked by fellow craftsmen. 3. Bureaucratic hierarchy. At the top sat the Oar Standardization Council, comprised of esteemed shipbuilders and chieftains. Below them, local guild leaders enforced the regulations within their communities, ensuring that every longship had oars that conformed to the prescribed lengths. Roles and job descriptions, the men and women behind the oars. With bureaucracy comes a need for roles, and the Viking shipbuilding industry was no exception. Below are the key players in the oar standardization game. 1. Master Shipwright. Responsibilities: oversee the entire shipbuilding process, including oar production. Skills: exceptional woodworking ability, leadership, and an uncanny knack for measuring sticks. 2. or craftsman. Responsibilities: construct oars to specification, ensuring compliance with the length regulations. Skills: proficiency in carving and a deep understanding of wood properties. Must also possess the ability to endure endless discussions about the virtues of ash versus oak. 3. Quality inspector. Responsibilities: inspect oars for compliance with the standard lengths before they are affixed to ships. Skills: keen eye for detail, a ruler always at hand, and the ability to withstand grumbling from craftsmen who insist that a little longer never hurt anyone. 4. Bureaucratic scribe. Responsibilities: maintain records of oar production, compliance, and any punishments administered. Skills: excellent writing skills and the ability to dodge angry craftsmen wielding freshly carved oars. ##### Technical specs and inventories, the numbers game. To truly understand the Viking Longship Oar standardization, one must delve into the nitty-gritty of technical specifications. By 1000 AD, the documentation regarding oar lengths had evolved into a comprehensive inventory system. 1. Specifications. Length: 3.5 to 4.5 meters, with variations based on ship class. Diameter: typically around 5 to 8 centimeters for the shaft, blades varied in width from 15 to 30 centimeters. Weight: a standard oar weighed approximately 2 to 4 kilograms, depending on the type of wood and design. 2. Inventory records. Each shipyard maintained meticulous inventory logs detailing the number of oars produced, their lengths, and the responsible craftsman. An example entry might read: Date: July 15, 1000. Craftsman: Bjorn the Stalwart. Oar length: 4.0 meters. Compliance: yes. Notes: wood grain particularly fine this season. No splinters detected. Also, Bjorn claims to have seen a dragon last week. 3. Standardization charts. By 1100 AD, visual aids in the form of charts began to circulate, illustrating ideal oar lengths and shapes, which were displayed in guild halls to educate new craftsmen. Oar length: it's not rocket science, just wood science, became a popular slogan amongst the shipwrights of the time. ##### Conclusion: the legacy of oar length standardization. In the grand scheme of Viking history, the standardization of longship oar lengths may seem trivial. Yet, it played a crucial role in ensuring that Viking ships could navigate the turbulent waters of the North Atlantic, enabling the Norsemen to embark on their legendary voyages. The meticulous attention to detail in oar production, reinforced by a robust bureaucratic framework, not only enhanced naval efficiency but also cultivated a sense of unity among Viking shipbuilders. So, the next time you hear tales of Viking conquests, remember that behind every great raid lies an equally great oar, and a whole lot of paperwork ensuring it was precisely the right length. After all, in the world of Viking maritime engineering, nothing was left to chance. As they say, a short oar never rows a long ship. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. In the frosty fjords of Scandinavia, where the wind whispers tales of daring raids and explorations, there lies an unsung story that is both riveting and surprisingly mundane. Yes, we're diving into the nitty-gritty of Viking Longship Oar length standardization procedures, a saga that rivals epics, albeit with a lot more measuring and a lot less pillaging. Construction methods and materials, 800 to 900 AD. The Vikings were no strangers to innovation. Their longships were marvels of engineering, designed for speed and agility on the open seas. The oars, crucial for both propulsion and steering, were constructed from locally sourced materials. 1. Wood selection. Oak, the preferred choice, known for its durability and strength. Ash, lighter and more flexible, often used for oars where speed was prioritized. Spruce, occasionally utilized for lower quality oars, or for less experienced rowers, because who wouldn't want their oars to be as sturdy as a Viking warrior? 2. Construction techniques. Hewn versus laminated. Oars were typically hewn from a single piece of wood, though some craftsmen experimented with laminated techniques, gluing strips of wood together for increased flexibility, an innovation that could very well have inspired IKEA's later flat-pack furniture. Smoothing and shaping. Tools such as axes and adzes were employed to shape the oars, with the ideal length hovering between 14 to 18 feet, depending on the size of the ship and the height of the rower. 3. Costs. The cost of an oar in the late 9th century varied significantly based on material and craftsmanship, averaging around 1 to 2 silver coins. This was a significant investment for the average Viking, comparable to what one might spend on a good sword or a particularly flashy shield. 2. Bureaucratic rules and punishments, 900 to 950 AD, ***. As Viking society evolved, so did its bureaucratic structure. The need for standardization arose not from a love of paperwork but from the chaos of mismatched oar lengths during naval expeditions. 1. Standardization edicts. In 925 AD, the Council of the Fjords convened, leading to the first official or measurement standard, the Oar Length Proclamation of 925. It mandated that all oars produced for longships must measure between 15 and 16 feet. Regional variations were documented and codified, leading to the establishment of local guilds responsible for oar production. 2. Enforcement and punishments. Craftsmen found producing oars outside the standards faced hefty fines, typically 3 silver coins, and the potential for public shaming. Imagine a disgraced oarsman being forced to row in circles while their peers looked on. Repeat offenders could find themselves banished from the local guilds, effectively dooming them to a life of rowing poorly made oars on their own. 3. Roles and job descriptions ****. In Viking society, every member had a role to play, and oar production was no exception. 1. The master oarsman. Responsibilities: overseeing oar production, ensuring compliance with the standardization rules, and training apprentices. Skills: must be adept in carpentry, measurement, and occasionally, diplomacy, especially when dealing with disgruntled craftsmen. 2. The apprentice or smith. Responsibilities: assisting in the crafting of oars, learning the trade, and fetching the occasional drink for the master oarsman. Skills: basic carpentry, an eye for detail, and a strong back. 3. The quality inspector. Responsibilities: measuring the oars to ensure they meet standards and reporting any discrepancies to the guild leader. Skills: precision measuring and the ability to frown disapprovingly at poorly made oars. 4. The guild leader. Responsibilities: managing the guild's operations, enforcing rules, and representing the guild in the council of the fjords. Skills: leadership, negotiation, and an uncanny ability to sniff out subpar craftsmanship from a mile away. 4. Technical specs and inventories, 950 to 1000 AD, ***. The Viking Age saw the rise of meticulous record-keeping, particularly concerning maritime equipment. 1. Technical specifications. Length: 15 to 16 feet, 458 to 488 centimeters, for standard longship oars, with variations for smaller vessels, like knars and sneckjas. Width: typically around 4 to 6 inches at the blade, tapering to about 2 inches at the grip. Weight: an average or weighed approximately 5 to 7 pounds, balanced well enough for both strength and ease of use. 2. Inventory management. By the year 1000, many coastal villages had established inventory lists detailing the number of oars produced, their lengths, and the materials used. This was the precursor to the modern, just-in-time inventory system, ensuring that no Viking ship left port without adequate oars. Notable finds from archaeological sites show that some villages boasted stocks of over 500 oars, enough to equip an entire fleet. V. The cultural impact of oar length standardization, 1000 AD onwards, ****. As the Viking Age waned, the standardization of oar lengths had lasting effects on maritime culture. 1. Influence on naval warfare. Standardized oars allowed for better coordination among crews, making longships more effective in battle. The saying, "a rower's strength lies in his oar's length," became common, though it was likely debated over mead. 2. Trade and exploration. With the ability to standardize oar lengths, ships could be built and repaired more efficiently, facilitating trade routes across Europe and beyond. By 1050, Viking ships had ventured as far as the Mediterranean, driven not just by desire for conquest but also the efficiency of their oar-powered vessels. 3. Cultural exchange. The interactions between Viking craftsmen and those of other cultures led to the exchange of ideas about shipbuilding and oar construction. Ironically, while Vikings are often remembered for their raids, they were also early adopters of cross-cultural collaboration in craftsmanship. 6. Conclusion ****. As we wrap up this deep dive into the surprisingly complex world of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures, it's clear that even the most mundane aspects of history can hold fascinating tales. The Vikings, while known for their audacious exploits, also understood the importance of a well-measured oar in making those exploits possible. So, the next time you find yourself in a heated debate over the best length for an oar, and let's face it, we've all been there, remember, it's not just about the wood, the shape, or the craftsmanship. It's about centuries of history, bureaucracy, and the undeniable truth that sometimes, even the fiercest warriors need a little standardization to keep their ships sailing smoothly. #### The mundane history of Viking longship or length standardization procedures. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### 3, 1066 AD, is often romanticized as a time of brutal raiders and daring explorers. Yet beneath the surface of their epic sagas lies a surprisingly mundane, and sometimes bureaucratic, history involving the standardization of longship oar lengths. This tale, while perhaps lacking in dragon-slaying excitement, reveals a fascinating intersection of construction methods, materials, costs, and the bureaucratic rules that govern the daily lives of these seafaring folk. #Construction methods and materials. During the late 9th century, Viking shipbuilders developed a variety of construction techniques that laid the foundation for their legendary longships. The most common materials used were oak, pine, and fir, sourced from the dense forests of Scandinavia. Oak was favored for its strength and durability, while pine and fir provided lighter alternatives for specific parts of the ship. 1. Wood selection. Oak, used for the hull and keel due to its robustness. Pine and fir, used for lighter structures, such as oars and masts. 2. Construction techniques. Clinker building, overlapping planks, strakes, were fastened together using iron rivets, creating a flexible and resilient hull. Lashing and pegging. In addition to nails and rivets, lashings made from animal sinew or hide were used to secure various components, adding to the ship's flexibility. 3. Cost considerations. The average cost of constructing a longship could range from 400 to 600 silver pennies, depending on the quality of materials and craftsmanship. The oars, often overlooked in financial discussions, could represent 10 to 15% of the total cost, leading to intense scrutiny over their length and efficiency. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. With the rise of the Viking trading network, standardized procedures for shipbuilding became essential. By the mid-10th century, various regional kings and chieftains established rules regarding oar length and construction methods, enforced by local officials known as shipwrights. 1. Standardization edicts. Oar length, mandated at 4.5 to 6 meters, depending on the ship's size. Material quality. Specific grades of wood were required, with an emphasis on avoiding knots and defects. 2. Enforcement and punishments. Shipwrights were tasked with ensuring compliance. Violations could result in fines, public shaming, or even the confiscation of the ship. One notorious shipwright in 963 AD was fined 30 silver pennies for using inferior wood, an offense that drew the ire of local nobility. It said his fellow craftsmen never let him forget it. He was the laughingstock of the shipyard. 3. Documentation. Shipwrights maintain detailed records, often inscribed on wooden tablets or wax boards, documenting the sizes and specifications of oars and ships. This led to the world's first oar-length compliance reports, not quite a bestseller, but certainly a hit in bureaucratic circles. ##### roles and job descriptions. The construction and maintenance of longships involved a diverse team of skilled laborers, each with specific roles that contributed to the overall success of the venture. 1. Shipwrights. Responsibilities: overseeing the construction process, ensuring adherence to standards, and training apprentices. Skills required: proficiency in woodworking, knowledge of maritime engineering, and an understanding of local laws regarding shipbuilding. 2. Oar makers. Responsibilities: crafting oars to the specified lengths and shapes, ensuring they were lightweight yet durable. Skills required: expertise in selecting and shaping wood, as well as an understanding of hydrodynamics, because no one wants an oar that acts more like a paddle. 3. Laborers. Responsibilities: assisting shipwrights and oar makers, transporting materials, and maintaining tools. Skills required: general labor skills, physical strength, and an uncanny ability to dodge falling timber. 4. Quality inspectors. Responsibilities: inspecting finished ships and oars for compliance, often acting as the final word in the approval process. Skills required: a sharp eye for detail and the ability to wield a sharp tongue. After all, no one likes to be told their hard work is up to snuff. ##### technical specs and inventories. The technical specifications for Viking longship oars were as precise as the political maneuverings of their era. By the early 11th century, a standardized inventory system emerged, detailing the essential measurements and types of oars used across different classes of ships. 1. Oar specifications. Length: 4.5 to 6 meters, with variations based on the intended use, e.g., war versus trade. Width: generally around 10 to 15 centimeters at the grip, tapering to 5 to 7 centimeters at the blade. Weight: a well-crafted oar weighed between 2.5 to 4 kilograms, allowing for easy maneuverability and speed. 2. Oar types. War oars, shorter and sturdier for quick maneuvers and combat situations. Trade oars, longer and lighter for speed during long voyages. 3. Inventory records. Shipyards maintain meticulous inventories, often listing thousands of oars and their specifications. For instance, in the famous shipyard of Roskilde, a record from 1025 AD details 1,500 oars of varying sizes, with annotations indicating whether they were battle-ready or pending inspection, the latter being a polite way of saying they were still in the doghouse. ##### The significance of standardization. The standardization of oar lengths was not merely a bureaucratic endeavor, it had profound implications for Viking society. It facilitated trade, improved ship performance, and ensured that longships could be built more efficiently. The advantages of standardization were clear, and by the mid-11th century, it became a model for other industries. 1. Economic efficiency. Standardized oars reduced production costs by allowing shipyards to utilize templates, minimizing waste. This meant more ships could be built in less time, thus expanding the Viking trading network. 2. Enhanced performance. Uniform oar lengths ensured that crews could row in unison, increasing speed and maneuverability. This was crucial in both trade and warfare, as it allowed for quick escapes or swift attacks. 3. Cultural exchange. As Viking longships spread to trade routes, the knowledge of or standardization traveled with them, influencing shipbuilding practices in other cultures. Who would have thought that oar lengths could bridge cultures? Just another way to say, we're all in this together, just as long as your oars are the right length. Conclusion. The story of the Viking longship oar length standardization procedures may lack the drama of a daring raid or a stormy sea battle, yet it stands as a testament to the ingenuity and organizational capabilities of the Viking Age. From the meticulous craftsmanship of oarmakers to the unforgiving scrutiny of shipwrights, every detail mattered in the quest for maritime excellence. In the end, it turns out that the Vikings were not just fierce warriors and intrepid explorers, they were also pioneers of standardization, laying the groundwork for future generations to build upon. So, the next time you think of Vikings, remember, they didn't just conquer lands, they standardized the seas. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. Introduction. The oar that rode the world. In the grand tapestry of Viking history, where tales of conquest, exploration, and mythical beasts abound, the unassuming longship oar often goes unnoticed. Yet, it was the oar that powered these vessels through stormy seas and calm waters alike, making it a silent hero of the Norse sagas. The oar's length, however, became a matter of great standardization, akin to the meticulous processes of modern bureaucracies, only with more beards and less coffee. Construction methods and materials. Early methods, c. 800 to 850 AD. The earliest Viking oars were primarily constructed from oak, prized for its durability and buoyancy. Craftsmen employed traditional methods, using hand tools such as axes and knives. Each oar was hewn from a single tree trunk, ensuring a solid and resilient design. The oar's blade was carefully shaped to be wider at the tip for better propulsion while tapering towards the handle for a comfortable grip. Materials, c. 850 to 900 AD. By the late 9th century, the Vikings began experimenting with different types of wood, such as ash and elm, known for their lightweight properties. This change allowed for longer oars without compromising structural integrity. The average oar length during this period ranged from 12 to 16 feet, depending on the size of the longship. Costs and economic considerations. The cost of crafting oars was relatively low, considering a skilled craftsman could produce one in a couple of days. However, if you factor in the labor of transporting raw materials and the opportunity cost of not raiding during oar-making season, the economic implications were significant. Oar production was part of the local economy, affecting trade routes and community relationships. Witty aside, it's said that a longship without oars is like a bard without verses, a lot of effort for little to no results. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. Establishing standards, c. 900 AD. With the Viking Age in full swing, the need for standard or lengths became apparent. Around 900 AD, an assembly known as the Thing was convened to draft regulations. The standard length was set at 14 feet, with minor variations allowed for different ship types. The decision was supported by extensive debates, often fueled by mead and the occasional sword fight. Enforcement and punishments. Non-compliance with or length standards was not taken lightly. Ship captains found guilty of using substandard oars faced penalties, including fines, public shaming, or worse, being forced to row with their own faulty oars until they sank. The Viking justice system was undoubtedly harsh, and punitive measures were often decided over a game of knucklebones. Roles and job descriptions. The oar maker, c. 850 to 950 AD. Oar makers were highly respected artisans responsible for creating and maintaining oars. Their job involved selecting the right type of wood, shaping the oars, and ensuring they met the established standards. They often worked in close quarters with shipbuilders, as the oars needed to be perfectly tailored to the craft's specifications. The ship captain, c. 850-1000 AD. The ship captain's role extended beyond navigation. They were also responsible for the crew's training in rowing techniques and ensuring that each oar was in prime condition. A captain caught ignoring or maintenance faced the ire of the crew, who were not shy about expressing their displeasure, often through loud and melodramatic mutinies. The scribe, c. 950 AD. In the later Viking Age, the introduction of literacy saw the emergence of scribes. These individuals were responsible for documenting oar specifications and compliance reports. Their meticulous records ensured that oar lengths remained standardized, and they served as the first bureaucratic enforcers of Viking maritime law. The only downside? They were often stuck indoors, while their more adventurous counterparts sailed the seas. Technical specs and inventories. Standard oar specifications, c. 900 AD. Length * 14 feet, plus or minus 6 inches. Width of blade * 9 inches at the widest point. Handle diameter * 2 inches, tapered for grip. Materials * primarily oak or ash, with occasional elm. Weight * approximately 10 to 12 pounds. Inventory management. By the late 10th century, shipyards began keeping detailed inventories of oars. A typical longship would carry anywhere from 20 to 30 oars, and records included details about each oar's material, length, and condition. Shipbuilders even created an oar inventory scroll to keep track of production and repairs, which would make any modern project manager proud. Witty aside, if only the Vikings had invented the clipboard, think of the longship efficiencies. The standardization process. Gathering input, c. 900 to 910 AD. Standardization began with consultative assemblies at the Thing. Representatives from various regions would gather to debate the merits of different oar lengths and materials. This was often a spirited affair, with various factions arguing for their preferred lengths. Some swore by 12 feet for speed, while others championed 16 feet for power. Testing and trials, c. 910 to 920 AD. Once a consensus was reached, oar lengths were tested in real-world conditions. Trials often involved rowing races between longships with varying oar lengths. The results would be documented, and adjustments made as necessary. Finalization of standards, c. 920 to 930 AD. After years of debate, testing, and occasional brawls, the 14-foot standard was officially adopted. This decision solidified Viking longship design and became the benchmark for future generations. ###### The impact of standardization. Cultural significance. The standardization of oar lengths had far-reaching implications. It facilitated the construction of larger fleets, allowing for more efficient rating and trade. The consistent oar length meant that ships could be built and repaired more easily, leading to a proliferation of longships across the Viking world. Economic ramifications. Economically, standardization allowed for better resource management. Timber resources could be allocated more efficiently, reducing waste and maximizing output. As a result, the Viking economy flourished, leading to greater wealth and power. Legacy, circa 1000 AD and beyond. By the turn of the millennium, the standardization of oar lengths had become a cornerstone of Viking maritime culture. Even as the Viking Age waned, the principles of standardization influenced shipbuilding practices in subsequent centuries, laying the groundwork for modern maritime engineering. Conclusion, the oar that changed history. In the grand narrative of Viking exploration and conquest, the humble longship oar stands as a testament to the power of standardization. While it may not have the allure of dragons or the thrill of battle, its role in shaping the Viking Age cannot be understated. So, next time you think of the Vikings, remember that behind every legendary raid and epic journey was a meticulously crafted oar, standardized to perfection, ensuring that the Norsemen could row their way into history, with a little help from the Thing, of course. In a world of chaos and adventure, sometimes it's the most mundane things that truly keep us afloat. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures, an epic saga of measurement and misadventure. In the annals of history, there are tales of great conquests, legendary battles, and heroic voyages across treacherous seas. But nestled between the sagas of gods and warriors lies a lesser-known, yet equally riveting story. The standardization of Viking longship oar lengths. Yes, you heard that right. While some may wax poetic about axe-wielding berserkers and dragon-headed longships, the true heroes of this saga are the bureaucrats and bean counters who painstakingly decided just how long those oars should be. Regional variations over time, the Oar Wars. Let's set the scene. The year is roughly 800 AD, and Viking society is a patchwork of kingdoms, each with its own peculiarities, customs, and, of course, oar lengths. Picture Norway's fjords, where oars are lovingly crafted to be 16 feet long, perfect for navigating those narrow, twisty waterways. Meanwhile, over in the Danish lands, they're swinging their axes and crafting oars that measure a respectable 14 feet. It's a veritable Goldilocks and the Three Bears situation, too long, too short, and just right, depending entirely on your regional preferences. But alas, the Vikings were not immune to the chaos that ensues when every seafaring nation decides to go rogue with their oar lengths. Imagine the confusion during raids when a Norse raider tries to board a British ship only to discover that his oar is just a smidge too short to reach the prized treasure. The longship's captain, let's call him Bjorn the Befuddled, raises an eyebrow as his crew struggles to paddle in sync, inadvertently rowing in circles like a bunch of confused ducks. The Vikings, being practical folk, soon realized that they needed some semblance of standardization. Enter the Oar Wars, a series of heated discussions, and probably a few brawls, in which regional leaders argued over how long an oar should be. The Norwegians insisted on their 16-foot beauties, while the Danes countered with their 14-foot offerings. It was like a never-ending debate about the best way to prepare haggis, with each side convinced their way was the only way. Laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers, the paper trail of the sea. As is the case with most things in life, the oar wars could not be resolved by sheer bravado alone. Enter the bureaucratic overlords, ready to wield pens instead of swords. In a move that would make any modern-day accountant weep with joy, Viking chieftains began issuing laws and edicts that mandated oar lengths, officially known as the oar length decrees. These decrees were no mere scribbles on a scrap of parchment. No, they were meticulously documented in ledgers that would put any contemporary tax form to shame. The ledgers recorded everything, oar lengths, materials used, and even the occasional complaint from disgruntled oarsmen who found themselves stuck with a too short oar. Dear Bjorn, I can't reach the treasure with this twig you've given me. Taxation also entered the equation, as the Viking leaders realized they could capitalize on this newfound standardization. A tax on oars was implemented, the oar tax, which required every shipwright to pay a fee based on the length of the oars they produced. The longer the oar, the heftier the fee, a clever way to ensure that only the most skilled craftsmen could afford to make those prized 16-footers. Of course, this led to a black market for oars of varying lengths. Shipwrights began crafting stealth oars, cleverly disguised as standard lengths but just a touch longer or shorter, depending on the demand. If they got caught, they'd face the wrath of the local chieftain. Bjorn, we caught you selling 15-foot oars. What do you have to say for yourself? They were for a very special customer who needed a little extra reach. The bureaucratic entanglement didn't end there. As the years rolled on, various Viking kingdoms began to exchange oars as part of trade agreements, leading to even more confusion. You want 50 longship oars in exchange for 20 barrels of mead? Oh, but did you want the Norwegian size or the Danish? Logistics and supply chains, the orchestra of transport. Now, if you think the Viking longship or standardization was solely a matter of decrees and taxes, think again. It also required a logistics operation that would make modern supply chain managers weep with envy. The trade routes established by the Vikings for transportation were like an intricate web, connecting various regions and ensuring that every ship could get the right length of ore, provided they had the right connections. Think of it as an ancient version of Uber Eats, except instead of delivering sushi, they were transporting ores across rough seas and treacherous terrain. Shipwrights in Norway had to coordinate with traders in Denmark, who then had to negotiate with merchants in England, all while keeping track of the ever-elusive ore tax. And let's not forget the logistics of raw materials. The ores were made from various types of wood, each with its own regional specialties. Norway had its sturdy birch, while Denmark boasted mighty oak. But imagine the chaos when an ore shipment from the North Sea got mixed up with a batch of lumber meant for a shipyard in the south. Oops. Sorry, we accidentally sent you 200 feet of birch instead of oak. Good luck with that. The whole supply chain was a delicate dance of coordination, with traders and shipwrights trying to ensure that ores arrived on time and in the right lengths. It was a logistical nightmare, but one that the Vikings undertook with remarkable tenacity. Record keeping, the saga of the scrolls. As any diligent bureaucrat will tell you, record keeping is the bedrock of any standardized system. The Vikings were no slouches when it came to documentation. They kept detailed records of ore lengths, craftsmen, and even customer complaints in scrolls that could rival the length of the ores themselves. Each time a shipwright crafted a new set of ores, they would jot down the dimensions, materials, and intended destination. Today, I crafted 5 16-foot oars for Olav the Brave, and 1 14-foot oar for Sigurd the Short. Note, Sigurd does not appreciate the irony. These records were precious, preserved for future generations to marvel at. Historians now pore over these ancient scrolls, trying to decipher the intricacies of Viking or craftsmanship while simultaneously wondering how they managed to keep track of such minutiae amidst the chaos of raiding and pillaging. But the record-keeping process wasn't without its quirks. Once, a particularly overzealous scribe recorded a transaction involving a set of oars intended for a nobleman, but accidentally mixed up the parchment with a scroll detailing the local goat population. The result? One set of 16-foot oars for the nobleman and 50 goats for the local tavern. You can only imagine the confusion when the nobleman showed up to collect his prized oars only to find himself face to face with a herd of bleeding goats. This isn't what I ordered. I wanted oars, not goats. A surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote, the Oar of Destiny. Now, for the piece de resistance of this tale, a rather surprising and borderline grotesque anecdote that serves as a testament to the lengths, pun intended, to which Vikings would go for the perfect oar. Legend has it that during one particularly frigid winter, a group of Vikings found themselves stranded on an icebound shore, desperately in need of oars to escape. As they rummaged through their supplies, they stumbled upon a rather unfortunate shipwright who had recently passed away. In an act that would make even the most hardened historical figure shudder, the Vikings decided to use the shipwright's wooden leg as the basis for a new oar. Desperate times call for desperate measures, one Viking declared, as they fashioned the leg into a makeshift oar. It was the talk of the town when they finally returned to their village, a tale that would be told for generations. You'll never believe what we did to get back home. We made an oar out of a man's leg. This tale morphed into a legend, with every retelling growing more elaborate. Some claimed it was the leg of a famous shipwright, others said it had magical properties. But the moral of the story remains clear: when in doubt, never underestimate the lengths to which a Viking will go for a proper oar. Epilogue: The legacy of oar length standardization. So, what have we learned from this seemingly mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures? It turns out that behind every epic saga lies a tale of bureaucracy, logistics, and the surprising lengths, yes, again, pun intended, that people will go to for a well-crafted oar. While the bards may sing of glorious battles and daring raids, let us not forget the unsung heroes of the Viking Age, the shipwrights, the bureaucrats, and the occasionally desperate raiders. They may not have wielded swords or conquered kingdoms, but their legacy lives on in the carefully measured oars that powered the longships that sailed the seas. In the end, the oars may have been just a small part of the Viking experience, but they were a crucial one that ensured the Viking Age would echo through the ages, both on land and at sea. And perhaps, just perhaps, the next time you find yourself in a debate about the best length for an oar, you'll think back to this tale and chuckle at the ridiculousness of it all. After all, in the grand scheme of history, it's the mundane that often makes the story truly epic. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures, a saga of numbers, edicts, and the gory side of logistics. Once upon a time in the frosty climes of Scandinavia, where the fjords weep and the northern lights dance like a hyperactive child on a sugar rush, there existed a maritime culture so robust that their longships were the envy of the seven seas. But what truly fueled these majestic vessels was not merely the strength of their oarsmen or the magic of the sea gods, it was something far more mundane, oar length standardization procedures. Yes, you heard that right. Imagine a group of burly, horned-helmeted Vikings huddled over ledgers, debating the exact specifications of their oars as if they were planning a tax evasion strategy. Regional variations, the oar length wars. In a world where you could hardly agree on what constitutes a proper breakfast, pickled herring or fermented shark, it's no surprise that Viking oar lengths were anything but uniform. Picture it, a band of Norsemen from Norway, proud and ferocious, wielding oars that measured a whopping 12 feet. Meanwhile, across the sea in Sweden, their brethren were content with a measly 10-foot model that barely reached the stern of their longships. This was not merely a matter of aesthetics, but rather a fierce point of contention. Imagine the tavern brawls. Your oars are too short for proper navigation. At least we don't have to worry about accidentally poking a whale. It was like a reality show, keeping up with the Kardashians, but with more facial hair and fewer commercial breaks. Regional variations were often exacerbated by the local geography. The fjords of Norway demanded longer oars for their steep shores, while the relatively flat waters of Sweden allowed for a snappier, more compact oar. As if the Vikings didn't have enough to fight about, raiding, pillaging, and feasting, they now had to contend with the length of their oars. And so, Amidst the chaos of longship construction, the first murmurs of standardization began to surface. Laws, edicts, and taxes, the Oar Code. It was not long before the need for some semblance of order led to the issuance of various laws and edicts concerning oar lengths. The Oar Code of 879 became a landmark document in Viking history, laying down the law for oar sizes across the Norse territories. It was a time when kings and jarls realized that if they were going to keep their raiding parties in check, they needed to establish some sort of legislative framework. Picture a gathering of Vikings in a dimly lit hall, parchment in hand, as a grizzled elder reads from the Oar Code. Let it be known that all oars shall measure no less than 10 feet and no more than 12 feet. Anyone found with an oar exceeding this length shall be subjected to a hefty tax based on their oar's excess length. It was a taxation scheme that made the IRS look like a benevolent charity. As a result, oar taxation became a lucrative endeavor. Kings would send tax collectors to scour the shores for excessive oars, armed with measuring tapes and a healthy dose of skepticism. Is that an oar or a spear? I can't tell. Logistics and supply chains, the oar economy. But what good is a law without the logistics to back it up? Enter the Viking supply chain, an intricate web of craftsmen, merchants, and the occasional plundered boat. The oar economy was thriving, and every village had its own oar maker, specializing in the precise art of oar crafting. Imagine a bustling workshop, with the clatter of axes and the scent of freshly hewn wood wafting through the air. Each oar was meticulously crafted, and the artisans were keenly aware of the specifications laid out in the Oar Code. Lad. This one's a solid 10.5 feet. I'll have the tax collector breathing down my neck if I'm not careful. Transporting these oars was another matter entirely. The logistics of moving oars from workshop to harbor were fraught with peril. Longships would often be loaded with oars, only to find themselves raided by rival clans or waylaid by storms. We lost 10 oars to the sea, and then another dozen to the Swedes. We're gonna need a bigger ship. The supply chain often resembled a game of Jenga, with oars precariously stacked and waiting to be claimed by their respective longships. The Vikings, always the resourceful lot, developed a system of marking the oars with specific runes to ensure they ended up with the right crew. This one's for Olaf's ship, and that one's for Bjorn's. If you see Sven's, throw it back. We don't want him in our waters. Record keeping, the Oar Ledger chronicles. As any good Viking knew, the real power lay in record keeping. This wasn't just a matter of tax evasion, no, this was a full-fledged bureaucratic endeavor. The Oar Ledger became an essential tool in the Viking toolkit. Every village maintained detailed records of their oar production, complete with measurements, wood types, and the occasional scandal. That oar was made from the finest oak, not that rotten birch. I demand a recount. The ledgers became a treasure trove of information, revealing much about the Viking way of life. They documented not just oar lengths but also the wood sources, the artisans involved, and even the occasional mishap. Accidentally used a cow's tail instead of a rope for tying an oar. That's a new one. By the time the Vikings expanded their exploration across the Atlantic, they had perfected the art of oar record-keeping. The oar ledger became a point of pride, a symbol of their maritime prowess. Look here, we've got oars from 5 different wood types and a 10% tax to boot. We're practically the Wall Street of the sea. The grotesque anecdote, the Oar of Doom. No Viking saga would be complete without a touch of the grotesque, and this tale is no different. One day, a village in Norway found itself in a particularly tight spot. Their oar supply was running low, and winter was approaching fast. Desperation hung thick in the air like the smell of stale mead. In a moment of sheer madness, the village chief decided to cut down the largest tree in the forest, a gnarled old oak that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless longships. When it was finally felled, they discovered, to their horror, that it had been hollowed out by a family of bears. Instead of tossing the tree aside, the chief, in a stroke of lunacy, declared it the Oar of Doom. They fashioned oars from the bear-riddled trunk, complete with the grisly remnants of the previous inhabitants. Aye, lads. This be a fearsome oar. No one shall dare challenge us with a weapon forged from the bones of our enemies. The result was a series of oars that were not only grotesque but also, unsurprisingly, incredibly heavy. The crew found themselves struggling against the weight of their newfound weapons. It wasn't long before they were dubbed the laughingstock of the fjord. Look at them, rowing with their bear-infested oars. What's next? A boat made of Viking skulls. In the end, the Oar of Doom became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils of desperation and the importance of adhering to the oar code. It also led to a rather awkward annual festival, where villagers would roast bears in honor of the unfortunate decision, while simultaneously trying to avoid being the butt of the joke. Conclusion: the legacy of the oar. And so, the saga of Viking Longship Oar length standardization procedures reminds us that even the mightiest of warriors were bound by the rules of bureaucracy, logistics, and the ever-pressing need for a good laugh. While their oars may have transported them across the seas to glory and plunder, it was the mundane aspects of life, the taxes, the ledgers, the logistics, that truly shaped the Viking experience. So next time you find yourself at a gathering, and the conversation turns to oars, remember the Vikings. Raise a glass to their absurdity, their tenacity, and their uncanny ability to turn the mundane into a saga of epic proportions. And perhaps, just perhaps, give a nod to the Oar of Doom, a grotesque reminder that even in the most serious of matters, a little levity can go a long way. Scowl. The mundane history of Viking Longship Oar length standardization procedures. Once upon a time, in the land of fjords, ice, and yet to be discovered IKEA furniture, the Vikings were busy plundering, raiding, and generally making life miserable for anyone who didn't have a strong enough shield wall. But, as it turns out, even the most fearsome marauders in history had a soft spot for bureaucracy, especially when it came to standardizing the length of their longship oars. Yes, you read that right. Oars. Such an unassuming topic, but one that reveals the many quirks of Viking life, much like a runestone that, upon closer inspection, turns out to be a grocery list. Regional variations over time. Let's start with the oars themselves. You would think that in a seafaring culture known for its ferocity and occasional flair for dramatics, oar lengths would be as straightforward as a one-eyed god's decree. However, Viking oars were subject to regional variations that would make even the most seasoned bureaucrat weep into their quill. In the northern territories, oars tended to be longer, perhaps to compensate for the rougher waters and the general need to paddle faster away from angry sea monsters, or fellow Vikings who forgot to bring their share of mead. Meanwhile, in the more temperate southern regions, oars were shorter and more practical, as the waters were less tumultuous and the Vikings more likely to be distracted by the allure of nearby farmland, or their own reflection in the water. As the Vikings began to settle, these regional variations began to marry with local customs. In some areas, the length of the oars became a point of pride, much like a peacock displaying its feathers, or a Viking boasting about the number of enemies they had vanquished. This would lead to some rather heated debates at the local thing, the Viking assembly, where oar length could become a matter of honor. Imagine an assembly of burly Norsemen arguing passionately, not about the spoils of war but about the optimal oar length for a longship. One could almost hear the squabbling turning into a dirge. Laws, edicts, taxes, ledgers. As the Viking age progressed, so did the need for order, because nothing says, fearsome warrior, quite like a well-organized ledger. Soon enough, chieftains began issuing laws and edicts to standardize oar lengths, which was undoubtedly a major blow to the Viking spirit of rugged individualism. By Odin's beard! We cannot raid properly if everyone has a different oar length, one wise chieftain might have proclaimed, likely while wearing a helmet that was more decorative than functional. The laws varied from region to region, often depending on which chieftain had the most intimidating beard that week. For example, in the land of the Inglings, a common edict stated that all oars should measure precisely 12 feet, while in the neighboring realm of the Skjoldungs, the standard was only 10 feet. Not to be outdone, the Svipdag clan introduced a tax on oars that exceeded the standard length, which led to more than a few clandestine late-night, or shortening, parties. Imagine the scene, Vikings huddled around a fire, hastily whittling down their oars while keeping an eye out for tax collectors. I swear this is only for my personal use, one might shout, all the while trying to hide the evidence of their illicit or reducing activities. Logistics and supply chains. But wait! The saga continues. With all these variations in oar length, how did the Vikings manage the logistics of shipping oars? Enter the unsung heroes of the Viking world, the oarsmiths and lumber merchants. They were the backbone of the longship or supply chain, crafting oars from various types of wood. If you wanted a sturdy oak oar, you might have to send a longship all the way to the Baltic Sea. Imagine the logistics involved. A merchant sets sail with a cargo hold full of oak oars, only to find that the local warlord has decreed a new standard length of 12.5 feet, just to keep things interesting. Suddenly, our hapless merchant finds himself sitting in a fjord, counting his oars like a mother hen counting her chicks. 12.5 feet, what was I thinking, he laments, while the local tax collector eyes him suspiciously, ready to pounce on an opportunity for some new taxation. not to mention the supply chain issues that arose when different regions had preferences for different wood types. The Swedes loved their birch, while the Norwegians were staunch supporters of ash. This led to some rather creative bartering arrangements, with traders swapping not just oars but all sorts of goods, cows, grain, and even a few goats, which were apparently a hot commodity in the Viking trade market. Record keeping with lots of specifics. As the Viking Age progressed into a more civilized time, if you can call it that, the need for record keeping became paramount. Oar lengths, it turns out, were not just a matter of personal preference but also a matter of legal standing, and so the Vikings began to document everything in ledgers that would make a modern accountant blush. These ledgers were filled with meticulous details about oar lengths, wood types, and who owed what to whom. Olaf the Stout owes me 3 oars of 12 feet, and 1 of 10 feet, a ledger entry might read, glossed over with a flourish that only a Viking scribe could muster. The notes were sometimes accompanied by drawings, an oar here, a longship there, because nothing says, I mean business, like a hand-drawn illustration of your merchandise. Of course, this was all rather boring and tedious for a culture that thrived on excitement and adventure. So, to inject some enthusiasm into their documentation, some clever Vikings began to include illustrations of their more notable raids alongside the oar records. This is what we did after we finished our oar accounting, one scribe might have scrawled, depicting a glorious scene of pillaging with oars proudly displayed in the background. One surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. And now, for the piece de resistance, a surprising and slightly grotesque anecdote that illustrates the lengths to which the Vikings would go for their beloved oars. It is said that during a particularly harsh winter, the inhabitants of a small village found themselves in dire straits. The rivers had frozen over, and the supply of wood for oar-making dwindled. As desperation set in, the village chieftain decreed that they would have to make do with what they had. As the story goes, one particularly resourceful Viking named Bjorn the Unfortunate decided that if they were going to make oars, they'd need wood, any wood. So, he did what any sensible Viking would do, he decided to fashion oars from the local grave markers. Yes, you read that correctly. The very tombstones of their ancestors were repurposed into longship oars. And so, with great fanfare and a fair bit of guilt, Bjorn and his compatriots began to chisel away, crafting oars from the very markers that commemorated their forebears. Don't worry, they'll be rowing in Valhalla. Bjorn likely proclaimed as he fashioned an oar from the grave of a long-dead warrior. The villagers rallied behind him, and soon the longship was ready for its maiden voyage, paddled by oars that bore the names of their ancestors. Imagine the scene, a ship gliding across the icy waters, with oars that were not only functional but also, in a macabre twist, a tribute to those who had come before them. As the ship set sail, the village erupted in cheers, until they realized that the ghosts of their ancestors might not be too pleased with their new mode of transportation. Legend has it that the ship was cursed, leading to a series of unfortunate mishaps and misadventures that became the subject of many a fireside tale. In the end, the Vikings may have been fierce seafarers and pillagers, but they were also an oddly bureaucratic bunch when it came to oar lengths. And while they may have raided far and wide, it was the oars that truly kept their ships afloat, both literally and figuratively. So, the next time you think about Vikings, don't just picture them with axes and shields. Remember the unsung heroes of our standardization procedures, the merchants, and the unfortunate exploits of Bjorn the Unfortunate. Because sometimes, history is as mundane as it is bloody. The mundane history of Viking longship or length standardization procedures, a comprehensive examination. The Viking Age, an era teeming with bloodthirsty raiders, daring explorers, and the occasional burst of poetic verse about the beauty of Norse gods. But beneath the surface of this grand saga lies an equally riveting story of something much less glamorous, the standardization of longship or lengths. Yes, you read that right. While you might be tempted to imagine valiant warriors hoisting their swords, they were also grappling with the eternal dilemma of oar length. In fact, the history of Viking longship or length standardization is a tale that rivals the epic sagas in its absurdity and intrigue. ###regional variations over time. In the halcyon days of yore, Viking longships were the ultimate status symbols. A longship wasn't just a boat, it was a floating testament to your wealth, prowess, and ability to pillage. However, as every good Viking knows, the devil is in the details, or in this case, the oar length. Picture a time when Norsemen from different regions were crafting their vessels with oars that ranged from the length of a toddler's arm to that of a full-grown moose. As it turned out, there was no universal standard. The Danes preferred oars that resembled small tree trunks, while the Norwegians were keen on something more delicate, akin to a large baguette. Regional variations were rampant, driven by the whims of local craftsmanship, the availability of resources, and, of course, the individual preferences of the local chieftains who were more than happy to impose their own ideas of optimal oar length. This led to a cacophony of designs, some of which might as well have been made by blindfolded children with a penchant for abstract art. As longships evolved, so did their oars, leading to an era of confusion akin to a buffet where every dish is a mystery. ###laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers. Enter the bureaucrats of the Viking Age, those unsung heroes, or villains, depending on your perspective, who took it upon themselves to wrangle this wild world of oar lengths. It's easy to picture a grizzled Viking chief, sword in hand, bellowing orders, but behind him stood a scribe with an ink-stained tunic, taking notes as though his life depended on it. And perhaps it did, for the fate of many a Viking ship, and its crew, rested on the length of its oars. In a stroke of genius or madness, the line is fine, various local assemblies began to issue laws and edicts governing oar length. These weren't just suggestions, they were mandates, backed by fierce Viking law and, more importantly, taxes. The local chieftain might decree that all oars must be precisely 2.5 cubits long, whatever that means, and woe betide anyone caught wielding a rogue oar that was, say, 2.6 cubits long. Penalties varied from minor fines to the loss of one's ship, a fate worse than death for any self-respecting Viking. And let's not forget the ledgers. Oh, the ledgers. The meticulous record-keeping of oar lengths became an obsession. Scribes toiled endlessly, documenting the lengths of oars, the names of their craftsmen, and the taxes collected from non-compliant boaters. It was practically a full-time job, akin to modern-day accountants poring over tax returns, but with a much higher risk of being thrown overboard if they got it wrong. Hashtag logistics and supply chains. Now that we've established the chaos surrounding oar lengths, let's dive into logistics. How did Vikings manage to supply their longships with the right-sized oars? Spoiler alert, it wasn't pretty. Picture long caravans of oar makers dragging their creations through the rugged Scandinavian landscape, dodging marauding bears, and occasionally stopping for a hearty meal of pickled herring. The logistics of oar distribution were a logistical nightmare, with regional differences leading to all sorts of catastrophic supply chain failures. Imagine a group of Viking sailors eagerly awaiting their new shipment of oars, only to find that the local oar maker had sent them a mismatched batch that resembled a game of "which of these doesn't belong?" One ship might end up with oars suited for a canoe, while another received oars that could double as telephone poles. The subsequent disputes could escalate quickly. There's nothing quite like a maritime brawl over oar length to get the blood pumping. Hashtag record keeping with lots of specifics. As the Viking Age progressed, the obsession with oar lengths led to increasingly detailed record-keeping practices. These records didn't just include the length of the oars, they also detailed the type of wood used, the craftsmanship involved, and even the mood of the oar maker on the day of creation. Today's oars made from oak, slightly grumpy craftsmen, and possibly hungover from last night's meat-fueled revelry. One particularly detailed ledger from a small village in Norway recorded the oar lengths of every ship in the fleet, along with the corresponding lengths of the oars. These records included fascinating details such as the weather conditions on the day the oars were constructed and even the number of crows spotted overhead. 3 crows today, not a good omen for oar length compliance, the scribe would note cryptically. It's worth mentioning that these records were not always accurate. With the passage of time and the occasional drunken scribe, discrepancies abounded. One infamous error recorded an oar length of 10 cubits for a longship, which would have made for a rather unwieldy vessel. Perhaps it was a mere typo, or perhaps someone was just having a laugh at the expense of future historians. Regardless, these inaccuracies only added to the rich tapestry of absurdity surrounding oar length standardization. Hashtag a surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. And now, for the piece de resistance, a tale so shocking that it may leave you questioning your faith in humanity, or, at the very least, your faith in Viking craftsmanship. Legend has it that during a particularly ambitious attempt to standardize oar lengths, a local chieftain decided to host a grand competition. The goal? To see who could craft the perfect oar, measured to the chieftain's exact specifications. All the finest oar makers gathered, each hoping to win the favor of the chieftain and secure lucrative contracts for future oar production. The day of the competition arrived, and excitement buzzed through the air like a swarm of angry bees. However, as the competition progressed, an unexpected twist emerged. One particularly ambitious oar maker decided to employ a unique, albeit grotesque, technique. In a bid to create the lightest, most buoyant oar, he experimented with hollowing out the wood. But in his frenzy, he accidentally stumbled upon a method that involved using animal bones as supports within the oar. Yes, you read that correctly, bone-infused oars. When the oar maker proudly presented his creation, the crowd was initially awed, until they realized that the bones belonged to the chieftain's prized pet goat, which had gone missing a few weeks prior. The chieftain was not amused. In a fit of rage, he ordered the oar maker to be thrown overboard, but not before a grand debate erupted among the onlookers. Some argued it was a stroke of genius, while others were horrified at the idea of using goat bones in something as vital as an oar. And thus, the tale of the goat bone oar entered the annals of Viking history, serving as a cautionary tale for future oar makers. Sometimes, it's best to keep your oars and your livestock separate. #conclusion. So there you have it, the mundane yet utterly fascinating history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. From regional variations to absurd bureaucratic edicts, the saga of oar lengths is a testament to the lengths, pun fully intended, that these seafaring warriors went to achieve the perfect balance between practicality and pride. Amid the blood-soaked tales of conquest and exploration, there lies a world of astonishing absurdity, reminding us that even the fiercest raiders had to grapple with the complexities of logistics, record-keeping, and the occasional goat bone. So the next time you picture a Viking charging into battle, sword raised high, take a moment to consider the oars that got him there, crafted with care, measured with precision, and perhaps, just perhaps, infused with a dash of goat bone. And if you ever find yourself on a longship, remember this: it's not just the sword that matters, it's the oar length too. #The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. Ah, the Viking Age. A time of epic battles, daring exploration, and a collective wardrobe that could only be described as furs and aggression. We often romanticize the Norsemen as fierce warriors, but what we rarely discuss is the heart-wrenching drama that unfolded behind the scenes of their maritime exploits, the standardized length of their longship oars. Yes, dear reader, the saga of Viking oar length is a tale steeped in regional variations, bureaucratic red tape, and a dash of grotesque humor. Buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey that will make your high school history class seem like a roller coaster ride. Regional variations over time. To understand the Viking longship oar length standardization, we must first appreciate the geographical and cultural variations that influenced these sturdy sticks of wood. Picture it. You've got your Norsemen sailing from the fjords of Norway to the windswept shores of Ireland, each region producing oars that reflect local craftsmanship, environmental materials, and, of course, the ever-elusive, personal touch. In Norway, oars tended to be longer, often exceeding 12 feet, thanks to the abundance of tall trees and the thirst for speed on the open seas. Meanwhile, in Denmark, the oars were shorter, more like 8 to 10 feet, tailored for the shallower waters of the Baltic. This created a delightful little conundrum whenever Viking warriors found themselves in a mixed fleet. Imagine the chaos as oars clashed and splintered like a bad Viking comedy skit. "Hey Olaf, your oar is a foot shorter than mine." No wonder you keep sinking. Over time, as Viking trade routes expanded and interregional mingling flourished, primarily to the delight of the local alehouses, there arose a pressing need for standardization. Think of it as a Viking version of the United Nations, but instead of negotiating peace treaties, they were negotiating how many feet of wood were required to effectively row a longship. ###### laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers. Ah yes, nothing says fun quite like legislation. Once the need for standardization became apparent, Viking leaders took it upon themselves to draft laws and edicts, which was no easy task when your government often consisted of a bunch of bearded men shouting over mugs of mead. The first known edict concerning oar length came from King Harold Fairhair in the late 9th century, who decreed that all longship oars should measure exactly 11 feet. This, of course, led to the immediate question, who measured them? And with what? Ah, the age-old problem of accuracy. Various regional chieftains started measuring oars with whatever they had on hand, strings, ropes, even the occasional disgruntled villager. The Viking equivalent of a tax collector, the orculator, would soon emerge, tasked with measuring and taxing oars based on their length. These orculators would keep meticulous ledgers filled with entries like Oar of Bjorn, 10 feet 8 inches, or Oar of Sigurd, suspiciously long and probably a fishing rod. This led to a fascinating subculture of oar taxation, where the wealthiest Vikings would flaunt their longer oars as status symbols. Oh, you've got a 10-foot oar. How quaint. I just had mine reinforced with dragon bone. It's a full 12 feet, and I named it Thor's Revenge. Thus, the oar became not just a tool for rowing but a matter of pride and, in some cases, a means of social warfare. ##### logistics and supply chains. Now, let's talk about logistics. Picture the scene, a bustling Viking market, where longship builders haggle over the price of timber, while oar makers complain about supply chain issues like they were in a modern-day boardroom meeting. We've got a shortage of oak, and the birch isn't cutting it. We need to source some wood from the east. One can only imagine the frustration of a Viking oar maker faced with a supply chain disruption, all while trying to meet the newly minted edict of King Harold. The logistics of oar production were nothing short of a maritime ballet. Timber was transported over land and sea, often requiring a fleet of smaller vessels just to ferry the raw materials to the oar-making hubs. Think of it, a Viking ship full of lumbermen bickering over the best knots while navigating treacherous waters. No, Eric. Don't tie that there. We'll end up with a boat full of soggy lumber and a reputation worse than a bad bard song. As the demand for standardized oars grew, so too did the complexity of the logistics involved. Oar makers started forming guilds, which led to the birth of oar fairs, where craftsmen would showcase their wares. Step right up, folks. Witness the wonders of the 11-foot oar, guaranteed not to snap under pressure. Or your gold back. ##### record keeping with lots of specifics. With all this chaos comes the need for record keeping. Vikings were surprisingly meticulous when it came to documenting their maritime ventures, even if they had a tendency to embellish the truth, a Viking specialty. Oar lengths, types of wood, and even the names of the craftsmen were carefully recorded in ledgers that would make any modern accountant weep with joy. These ledgers contain not only the dimensions of the oars but also detailed accounts of their performance. Oar of Torvald, 11 feet, rode 5 seas and conquered 3 villages before splintering on a particularly ambitious wave. There was even an unofficial Oar Hall of Fame, where legends like the Oar of Odin's Favor were celebrated for their durability and speed. The record-keeping became so intricate that by the mid-10th century, it was common to find oar-related documents in Viking homes. Honey, have you seen the ledger? I can't find the entry for the oar I used to row across the North Sea. Check under the fur coat, dear. I think I saw it there last week, along with that questionable tax form for King Harold's orculator. ###### A surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, for the piece de resistance, a surprising anecdote that would turn even the most seasoned Viking's stomach. Legend has it that during a particularly brutal winter, when supplies were running low, a small village found itself in dire straits. With their food stores dwindling and the icy fjords rendering fishing impossible, the villagers made a shocking decision: they would resort to using their oars for sustenance. Yes, you read that right. They decided to convert their beloved oars into a sort of porridge. The wood was soaked, boiled, and mashed into a mushy concoction that was said to have a distinctly earthy flavor. This culinary experiment became known as oar porridge, and while it didn't exactly catch on as a culinary trend, it did lead to some rather grotesque tales. One villager, named Egil, was particularly proud of his oar porridge and decided to host a feast to showcase his creation. Guests arrived, curious and skeptical, only to be greeted with bowls of viscous slop that looked more akin to shipwreck remnants than a meal. "You'll never believe it, but this was once a mighty oar," he proclaimed, spooning the concoction into bowls. The evening ended with half the villagers in a state of mild disgust, while the other half were surprisingly enthusiastic. "You know, it's not bad. Tastes a bit like soggy wood, but with a hint of desperation." As the night wore on, the villagers found themselves laughing and sharing tales of their maritime misadventures, all while trying to ignore the strange aftertaste left by their oar-inspired feast. ######conclusion. And there you have it, the mundane yet oddly fascinating history of Viking longship or length standardization procedures. From regional variations and bureaucratic hiccups to the bizarre culinary experiments of desperate villagers, this saga reminds us that even the fiercest warriors had to grapple with the absurdities of life. So, the next time you think of Vikings, remember that beneath the armor and the battle cries lay a world of red tape, logistical nightmares, and the occasional bowl of porridge made from a longship oar. Now that is a legacy worth rowing about. The mundane history of Viking longship or length standardization procedures. When one thinks of the Viking Age, images of fierce warriors, longships slicing through icy waters, and epic sagas of adventure often come to mind. However, Nestled beneath the heroic tales lies a surprisingly mundane yet historically significant subject, the standardization of longship oar lengths. This topic may not evoke the same excitement as raiding parties or the discovery of new lands, but it offers a glimpse into the practical and organizational aspects of Viking society. The tale of Viking longship oars is not merely a story of wood and rope, it encapsulates the minutiae of maritime life, the interplay of minor figures, petty rules, and the fascinating case studies that reveal how a seemingly trivial aspect of seafaring had profound implications for trade, warfare, and exploration. #minor figures and petty rules. In the vast tapestry of Viking history, countless minor figures played a role in the everyday functioning of society, including shipbuilders, oarsmen, and local leaders. One such minor figure is Bjorn the Standardizer, a little-known shipwright from the coastal village of Lofoten in present-day Norway. Bjorn, in the late 9th century, took it upon himself to create a set of guidelines for oar lengths. He believed that standardization would improve the efficiency of ship crews, especially during long voyages where coordination was paramount. Bjorn's guidelines, however, were met with resistance. Local chieftains often had their own preferences for oar length based on their ship's design and the peculiarities of their home waters. One petty rule that emerged among competing clans was the oar length challenge, where different groups would compete to determine whose oar length was superior. This competition often devolved into absurdity, with oarsmen frantically measuring their oars against one another while spectators cheered or jeered. ###Case studies with dates and lists. The case of the Great Oar Length Debate of 927 AD illustrates the complexities of Viking oar standardization. In this year, a council of shipwrights from across Scandinavia convened in the town of Skara to discuss the need for a standardized oar length. The discussions were heated, with representatives from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark each advocating for their preferred measurements. The primary contenders emerged with their oar lengths as follows. Norwegian oars *4.5 meters, approximately 14.8 feet. Swedish oars *4.2 meters, approximately 13.8 feet. Danish oars *4.8 meters, approximately 15.7 feet. Amidst this debate, a lesser-known shipwright named Gunhild the Agile proposed a compromise, an adjustable oar design that could be modified based on the ship's purpose. This innovative solution was met with skepticism, yet it sparked a new discussion about adaptability in maritime design. Another notable case occurred in 963 AD, known as the Oar Length Accord of Uppsala. After years of contention, the leaders of the three regions agreed on a standardized oar length of 4.6 meters, approximately 15.1 feet. This lengthy negotiation process involved compromises and concessions that highlighted not only the importance of oar lengths but also the nuances of Viking diplomacy. The accord ultimately facilitated smoother maritime travel and trade, enabling ships to navigate more effectively across the tumultuous waters of the North Sea. Comparisons to other regions. The Viking approach to oar standardization can be compared to practices in other seafaring cultures of the time. For instance, the Mediterranean civilizations, particularly the Greeks and Romans, had established lengths for their oars based on the size of their triremes and galleys. The Greeks used a rather unyielding standard of approximately 5 meters, about 16.4 feet, for their trireme oars, which were optimized for speed and agility in naval warfare. Interestingly, the Chinese during the Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, also had their own standards, but these were often dictated by the ship's purpose and regional conditions. For example, river boats would have shorter oars, while ocean-going junks featured longer ones. The flexibility in the Chinese system contrasts sharply with the more rigid Viking standards, highlighting regional differences in maritime culture. #Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological finds have provided insightful glimpses into the world of Viking longships and their oars. Excavations at the Oseberg burial site in Norway, dating back to 834 AD, uncovered a remarkably preserved longship that featured a series of oars. Analysis of these oars indicated a range of lengths, reinforcing the notion that standardization was not yet fully realized during this period. Another fascinating find occurred in 1960 when the Roskilde 6 ship was excavated in Denmark. This longship, believed to be built between 1025 and 1075 AD, yielded oars measuring 4.6 meters, consistent with the oar length accord of 963 AD. The condition of these oars, having survived nearly a millennium underwater, emphasizes the craftsmanship of Viking shipbuilders and the importance of oar length in their maritime endeavors. In addition, Viking burial customs often included oars alongside other artifacts, signifying the importance of seafaring in their culture. The presence of oars in burial sites illustrates how integral these tools were to the identity of the Viking people, not merely as means of transportation but as symbols of their connection to the sea. Rhetorical questions to hook curiosity. What if the Vikings had never standardized their oar lengths? Could we have seen a vastly different trajectory in their maritime expansion and trade networks? Furthermore, how might modern naval engineering have evolved differently if the Viking approach to standardization had become a widespread model for other cultures? Conclusion. The saga of Viking longship oar length standardization reveals a world where minor figures and petty rules had significant implications for the broader narrative of seafaring. The case studies of the Great Oar Length debate and the Oar Length Accord of Uppsala illustrate the dynamic interplay of culture, trade, and technology in Viking society. While the tales of Viking warriors may overshadow the humble oar, the importance of standardization in ensuring successful voyages cannot be understated. As we delve into the annals of history, it becomes evident that even the most mundane aspects of life, such as the length of an oar, can illuminate the complexities of a civilization. In the end, the Viking longship oar serves as a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of a people who navigated not just the waters of the North Sea but also the intricate currents of their own societal evolution. And so, the story of oar length standardization, though seemingly trivial, is deeply woven into the broader fabric of Viking history, reminding us that even the most ordinary details can shape extraordinary legacies. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. When we think of the Vikings, images of fierce warriors, seafaring explorers, and epic sagas often come to mind. Yet, beneath this veneer of glory and adventure lies the often overlooked story of the standardization of longship or lengths, a procedure that, while mundane, reveals the intricacies of Viking society, trade, and regional interactions. This tale is steeped in minor figures, petty rules, and case studies that exemplify how even the most trivial aspects of daily life were governed by a desire for order and efficiency. Hashtag 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 minor figures and petty rules. The Viking Age, stretching from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, was characterized by a complex socio-political landscape where even the most minor figures played crucial roles in everyday life. Among these were the lesser-known oar masters, individuals tasked with overseeing the production, maintenance, and standardization of oars across different shipyards. While the names of prominent Viking leaders like Harald Hardrada or Leif Erikson echo through history, the oar masters remain largely anonymous. Yet, their influence was palpable. One such figure was Thorfinn the Tinkerer, a lesser-known oar master from a small fjord community in Norway around 950 AD. Thorfinn was notorious for his obsession with the minutiae of oar length, famously declaring, "A well-measured oar is a well-fought battle." His petty rules included the infamous Thorfinn's thumb rule, which mandated that oars must be precisely the length from the tip of his thumb to his elbow, an arbitrary measurement that was both impractical and often ignored. Nevertheless, local shipbuilders adhered to his whims out of a mix of respect and sheer exasperation. In contrast, in 1035 AD, a more pragmatic figure emerged, Gudrun the Gauge, who sought to unify oar lengths across regions. She proposed the gauge standard, which stipulated that oars should measure 3.5 meters, a length that allowed for effective rowing without compromising speed. This standard became widely accepted, leading to a notable reduction in discord among Viking crews. Hashtag 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 case studies with dates and lists. The standardization of oar lengths was not merely a whimsical pursuit, it had tangible implications for naval efficiency and military prowess. To illustrate this, we can examine several case studies from different regions and time periods. 1. The Battle of Clontarf, 1014 AD. During this significant battle against the Irish, Viking ships equipped with standardized oars had a decisive advantage. The oar's uniform length allowed for synchronized rowing, enabling a formidable assault on the Irish forces. This event marked a turning point in naval warfare and underscored the importance of oar standardization in achieving tactical superiority. Oar length, 3.5 meters, as per the gauge standard. Number of ships, 120. Outcome, a decisive Viking victory, cementing their dominance in Ireland. 2. The Great Eastern Expedition, 980 AD, a lesser-known venture. This expedition aimed to explore the eastern waters of the Baltic Sea. The crew faced challenges due to varying oar lengths among their ships. Disorganization led to a disastrous retreat, with some ships unable to keep pace, highlighting the chaos that ensued when oar lengths were not standardized. Oar lengths ranged from 2.5 to 4 meters. Number of ships involved, 40. Outcome: a hasty retreat, resulting in the loss of valuable cargo and crew. 3. The re-establishment of the Danegeld raids, 991 AD, following the standardization of oar lengths, Viking raiders found renewed success in their raids against England. The uniformity in oar lengths allowed for precision in maneuvers, enabling them to navigate the shallows of rivers and estuaries efficiently. Oar length, 3.5 meters, gauge standard. Raids conducted, 8 significant raids. Outcome: a considerable increase in plunder and wealth. These case studies reveal that oar length standardization was not merely an administrative detail but a pivotal factor influencing Viking naval strategy and success. ##### comparisons to other regions. While the Vikings were preoccupied with their oars, other regions were developing their own maritime practices. For instance, the Mediterranean sailors of the Byzantine Empire had their own set of standards for oar lengths, primarily dictated by the design of their galleys. A typical Byzantine oar measured about 4.2 meters, longer than the Viking standard, which allowed for greater propulsion but required more muscular strength from the crew. This difference reveals how geography and ship design influenced the development of maritime practices across cultures. In contrast, the Chinese naval practices during the same period were also distinct. Chinese junks utilized a unique system of paddles that could be adjusted in length, allowing for adaptability depending on the water conditions. This flexibility made them highly effective in their own right but lacked the uniformity the Vikings sought. The emphasis on standardization in Viking society stemmed not only from military necessity but from a cultural desire for order, reflecting a different mindset about efficiency and control. ####archaeological tidbits. Recent archaeological discoveries have provided fascinating insights into Viking oar-making practices and the implementation of standardization. Excavations at the Oseberg ship burial site in Norway revealed not only beautifully crafted longships but also preserved oars, some measuring precisely 3.5 meters. This finding corroborates the existence of the gauge standard and suggests that it was widely adopted by the Viking maritime community. Moreover, at the site of the Skuldalev ships near Roskilde, Denmark, archaeologists unearthed remnants of oars along with shipbuilding tools. Analysis of wear patterns on the oars indicated that they were not only standardized in length but also shaped for optimal performance, reflecting an advanced understanding of hydrodynamics. Interestingly, the discovery of oar-shaped artifacts in trade routes suggests that the Vikings might have traded oars with other cultures, further spreading their standardization practices. Items found in the remains of a trading post in York, England, included Viking-style oars, implying that the concept of standardization had permeated beyond Scandinavian borders, influencing maritime practices elsewhere. ###rhetorical questions. Could it be that the humble oar, a seemingly trivial piece of equipment, played a more significant role in shaping Viking identity than the grandest ships or most ferocious warriors? What if the very success of the Viking Age hinged not on battles won or lands conquered, but on the lengths of wooden poles that propelled them across the seas? ###Conclusion. The standardization of Viking longship oar lengths may seem an inconsequential detail among tales of conquest and exploration, yet it encapsulates the essence of Viking society, a blend of practicality, tradition, and cultural identity. From the quirky regulations of Thorfinn the Tinkerer to the pragmatic solutions of Gudrun the Gauge, the evolution of oar length standards reflects a society striving for efficiency amidst the chaos of its age. Through case studies, comparisons with other cultures, and archaeological findings, we learn that even the most mundane aspects of life can yield rich narratives that illuminate our understanding of history. In the end, the Vikings' commitment to standardization paved the way for their naval dominance, proving that even the simplest tools can wield immense power when wielded with purpose and precision. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. For a civilization renowned for their fierce raids and maritime prowess, the Vikings possessed an underappreciated penchant for bureaucratic systems, particularly regarding the standardization of longship oar lengths. While the image of a Viking invokes visions of horned helmets and ferocious battles, the less celebrated reality was that these seafaring Norsemen were equally committed to the minutiae of maritime governance. The seemingly mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures is a treasure trove of minor figures, petty rules, case studies, and archaeological tidbits that illustrate how even the fiercest warriors acknowledged the importance of uniformity in their seafaring endeavors. Minor figures and petty rules. At the forefront of this bureaucratic movement was a cadre of lesser-known figures, bureaucrats often overshadowed by their more illustrious Viking counterparts. Among them was Einar, the ruler of the oars, from the 10th century, who served as the chief or inspector for the region of Skane. Einar, a portly man known for his precise measurements and a penchant for rules, was responsible for the implementation of the first standardized oar lengths in the region. His most infamous decree was the Einar Regulation of 987 AD, which mandated that all oars for longships must measure precisely 4.5 ells, approximately 9 feet, to ensure optimal rowing efficiency. However, this decree was not without its controversies. Local shipbuilders often found themselves at odds with Einar over the exact measurement of an ell, leading to the infamous oar wars of 990 to 992 AD. During this period, shipbuilders from different regions clashed over the varying interpretations of the ell, with some claiming it was based on the length of a nobleman's forearm while others argued it was determined by the distance between the tips of one's outstretched fingers. In an effort to quell the unrest, Einar convened the Great Oar Summit of 993 AD, where petty regulations came to light, including the two-finger rule, that stipulated that any oar longer than the length of 2 fingers beyond the standard would be deemed illegal, and the 3 planks protocol, that required every ship to have a plank at the stern marked with the official oar length to avoid disputes. Case studies with dates and lists. Several notable case studies arose during the saga of Viking oar length standardization, each revealing the complexities and absurdities of the process. 1. The Skjoldr Incident, 1001 AD. This case involved the ship Skjoldr, which was built in the fjords of Norway. The shipbuilders, in a hurry to launch the vessel for the upcoming raid season, inadvertently crafted oars that measured 5.2 ells. Upon inspection by the local oar inspector, a minor figure named Bjorn, the Unyielding, the ship was deemed unfit for service and forced to undergo a retrofit. This incident led to the establishment of the Skjold clause, which dictated that any ship exceeding the oar length must be dismantled and rebuilt within 3 moons. 2. The Battle of the Oars, 1025 AD. A more dramatic case occurred in 1025 when 2 rival Viking clans, the Hrolfsons and the Bjornlings, faced off in what became known as the Battle of the Oars. The Hrolfsons accused the Bjornlings of using oars that were 0.5 Ls shorter than the standard, claiming that such a discrepancy gave the Bjornlings an unfair advantage in speed. The ensuing showdown led to a 3-day trial presided over by the local thing, where witnesses demonstrated their oars, and the length was meticulously measured using the Einar stick. Ultimately, the Bjornlings were found innocent, but the event prompted the creation of the Oar Integrity Act of 1026, which stipulated that all oars must bear a mark of authenticity. 3. The Great Oar Exchange, 1042 AD. This event highlighted the interregional trade of oars and the resulting discrepancies in lengths. As Viking traders traveled from Scandinavia to the British Isles, they brought with them oars crafted in different regions. An analysis conducted by the Viking Bureau of Oar Standards in 1043 revealed that oars from the British Isles were often shorter, measuring only 4.2 Ls, compared to the standard 4.5 Ls set by the Norse. This led to the Oar Trade Agreement of 1044, which sought to harmonize oar lengths across regions through diplomacy rather than conflict. Comparisons to other regions. The Vikings were not alone in their oar length standardization efforts. Throughout history, various maritime cultures employed similar measures to ensure their seafaring efficiency. The Mediterranean civilizations, for example, had their own systems. The Phoenicians, known for their advanced shipbuilding techniques, utilized oars that averaged around 6 feet in length, which were often crafted from a variety of woods, including cedar and oak. Their oar length regulations were less formalized than those of the Vikings, often varying by ship type and purpose, revealing a more fluid approach to standardization. In contrast, the Chinese during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, established a rigorous system for their riverine vessels. Their oar lengths were standardized based on the type of waterway navigated, with oars for the Grand Canal averaging around 4.5 Ls, similar to Viking standards. This parallel reflects a common understanding of the importance of uniformity in maritime navigation across cultures. Thus, while the Vikings are often romanticized for their brutal raids and exploration, it is crucial to recognize that their successes were also grounded in practical governance of their maritime resources, a reflection of their sophistication as a society. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings have further illuminated the importance of oar length standardization in Viking culture. Excavations of longships and burial mounds across Scandinavia have yielded numerous artifacts that provide insights into the oar-making process. For instance, the discovery of the Gokstad ship in Norway, dating back to the 9th century, revealed not only the craftsmanship of the Viking shipbuilders but also the remnants of oars that conformed to the standardized length of approximately 4.5 Ls. Additionally, the presence of oar marks on the Gokstad ship highlights the significance of oar length in determining rowing efficiency. Researchers discovered that the oar locks, metal fittings used to secure the oars in place, were spaced to accommodate the standardized length, emphasizing the meticulous planning that went into ship design. Such findings raise questions about how closely the Vikings monitored their practices and whether oar length standardization was a matter of life and death on the high seas. Moreover, the recent unearthing of Viking shipyards along the coast of Denmark has revealed tools and measuring devices that correspond to the oar length standards of the time. These tools, including wooden measuring sticks etched with the marks of oar lengths, suggest a sophisticated understanding of measurement and standardization that engaged both the practical and the bureaucratic. Rhetorical questions that hook curiosity. What can the bureaucratic minutiae of Viking oar length standardization tell us about the broader culture of governance in a society often reduced to the image of barbaric raiders? How did the establishment of such seemingly trivial regulations shape the success and longevity of Viking maritime ventures across Europe? Conclusion. In conclusion, the history of Viking longship oar length standardization is a testament to the complexity of a society often viewed through a narrow lens of violence and conquest. The minor figures who shaped these regulations, the petty rules that govern daily life, the case studies that highlight the absurdities of the regulatory process, and the archaeological findings that unveil the practicalities of maritime life all contribute to a richer understanding of Viking culture. This seemingly mundane history of oar standardization reveals how a civilization that conquered vast territories was equally adept at establishing order and efficiency in their seafaring endeavors. The legacy of these procedures continues to echo through history, inviting us to reconsider how we perceive the interplay of bureaucracy, culture, and maritime exploration. The mundane history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures. When we think of the Vikings, images of fierce warriors, epic sea voyages, and legendary sagas often dominate our imagination. Yet, hidden within this grand tapestry of Norse culture lies an intricate and seemingly mundane subject, the standardization of longship oar lengths. This topic, while appearing trivial at first glance, reveals a wealth of historical minutiae, minor figures, and petty rules that echo through the ages, reflecting not only the practicalities of maritime life but also the complexities of Viking society itself. ### Minor figures and petty rules. In the grand narrative of Viking exploration, the names of legendary figures such as Eric the Red and Leif Erikson often overshadow the lesser-known bureaucrats and local leaders who played pivotal roles in the everyday functioning of Viking communities. Among these minor figures was Bjorn, the Oar Master, a relatively obscure chieftain from the coastal settlement of Skagerrak. Bjorn is credited with creating the first known set of guidelines for oar length in the late 9th century. Bjorn's regulations of the oar emerged out of necessity. The Viking longships, while marvels of engineering, required a level of uniformity for efficiency. The oars varied significantly in length, ranging from 12 to 30 feet depending on the personal preferences of individual shipwrights and the sizes of their vessels. This inconsistency led to chaotic rowing experiences, causing some ships to veer off course during naval expeditions. To address these issues, Bjorn convened a council of local shipbuilders and sailors in 879 AD at a site known as the Oar Grove, a sacred place where oars were believed to be blessed by the gods of the sea. The council resolved to create a standard oar length of 20 feet, a decision that would ripple through Viking society. Bjorn's regulations, however, were not without contention. Rival chieftains, such as Arn the Discontented, protested, claiming that shorter oars would be more manageable and better suited for women and children. This dispute exemplified the social tensions within Viking communities, highlighting the intersection of gender roles and maritime labor. ###Case studies with dates and lists. The establishment of Bjorns or standards set a precedent, inspiring other Viking settlements to adopt similar practices. A notable case study occurred in 902 AD in the town of Birka, Sweden, where a maritime tribunal known as the Oar Thing was formed to discuss grievances related to oar lengths. The tribunal's records, preserved in the sagas, reveal a fascinating glimpse into the disputes that arose among shipbuilders. 1. The case of the unequal oars, 902 AD. Plaintiff, Sigurd the Builder. Defendant, Hilda the craftswoman. Issue, Sigurd claimed that Hilda's oars were 22 feet long, violating the established standard. Outcome, the tribunal ruled in favor of Sigurd, mandating Hilda to reduce her oars to the acceptable length of 20 feet. Hilda protested, arguing that longer oars provided better leverage, but to no avail. 2. The case of the crooked oar, 914 AD. Plaintiff, Eric the Unlucky. Defendant, Canute the Cunning. Issue, Eric accused Canute of selling him a crooked oar that was not only of improper length but also poorly crafted. Outcome, the tribunal ordered Canute to refund Eric and provide him with a new oar, establishing the importance of quality alongside standardization. These disputes not only reveal the practical concerns surrounding oar length but also serve as a microcosm of Viking societal values, where craftsmanship, fairness, and adherence to communal standards were of utmost importance. Comparisons to other regions. While the Vikings were busy standardizing their oar lengths, other maritime cultures were grappling with similar issues, albeit through different methods. For instance, in the Mediterranean, the ancient Greeks employed a different approach to oar length, focusing more on the artistry of shipbuilding rather than strict standardization. The Athenian triremes featured oars that varied in length based on the intended use of the ship, with some designed for speed and others for stability. The Romans, too, had their own peculiarities when it came to oar lengths. Their galleys often featured oars that were disproportionately long, reaching lengths of up to 40 feet, which required a specialized crew to manage effectively. This is in stark contrast to the Vikings, whose shorter oars allowed for more versatile handling and easier deployment by smaller crews. What can we glean from these differences? How did the Vikings, with their relatively uniform oar standards, manage to navigate the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic while their Mediterranean counterparts were focusing on grandeur and complexity? The answers lie deeply embedded in the Viking ethos of practicality and efficiency, which governed not only their naval operations but also their entire way of life. ###Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings have illuminated many aspects of Viking shipbuilding and/or usage, offering tangible evidence of their practices. Excavations at sites like the Gokstad ship burial in Norway have revealed not only the remains of intricate longships but also tools that were used for crafting oars. The preserved oars from these sites have allowed researchers to measure their lengths and construction techniques, confirming Bjorn's standardization efforts. One fascinating tidbit comes from the excavation at the Oseberg ship burial, dating back to around 834 AD. Among the artifacts found were several oars, some measuring precisely 20 feet, which suggests that Bjorn's regulations may have gained traction even before his formal decree. The archaeological evidence indicates that the Vikings were not merely adhering to standards but were also innovating in their shipbuilding practices, as they experimented with different materials like ash and oak to create the best oars for their longships. Additionally, Viking oars were often adorned with carvings and runes, serving both a decorative and functional purpose. Some oars featured intricate designs that identified the ship's owner or commemorated significant voyages. This blending of art and utility reflects the deep cultural significance attributed to maritime endeavors in Viking society. #rhetorical questions. As we delve deeper into the seemingly mundane topic of oar length standardization, we must ask ourselves, what can the meticulous practices of Viking shipbuilders and sailors reveal about their society's values and priorities? How did the pursuit of efficiency in something as simple as an oar reflect the broader ambitions and innovations of an entire civilization? #Conclusion. The history of Viking longship oar length standardization procedures, while appearing trivial, unravels a rich narrative that intertwines practical concerns with the complexities of Viking social structures. From the minor figures who enacted regulations to the case studies that highlight communal conflicts, we see how the Vikings navigated their world, not only across tumultuous seas but also within the intricate web of their own communities. Through comparisons with other regions, we gain insight into how different cultural values shaped maritime practices, revealing a tapestry of innovation and standardization that transcends borders. Archaeological discoveries further illuminate this narrative, anchoring it in the tangible remnants of a bygone era. In a world where the ferocity and bravery of the Vikings often capture our fascination, let us not overlook the mundane details that underpin their great sagas. For within the length of an oar lies a story of adaptation, community, and the relentless pursuit of excellence that defines the Viking spirit. And that's a wrap. We've dived into the wild world of topic, where the unexpected is just the beginning. Remember, it's not just about the destination, but the quirky detours along the way. Who knew? Insert witty line. Here's a surprising fact to leave you pondering. Did you know that? Insert surprising closing fact. Just goes to show, there's always more than meets the eye. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And if you're itching for more, check out our related episodes for an extra dose of topic. Oh, and before you drift off, don't forget to turn on loop so this episode can play on repeat until you fall asleep. Sweet dreams.